I'll never forget the moment an old man in town spat the words, "He'll regret it," while staring at the two scared boys standing in my driveway. 10 years later, that same man was clapping, yes, clapping, as those boys stood on stage being honored for saving this town. Funny how karma has a way of turning whispering cowards into quiet admirers. But to understand how we got there, you need to hear what Springfield did to us. If you've ever been underestimated, judged unfairly, or pushed to your breaking point, hit that like button. Because this is the story of how one grieving man took in two broken boys, and how the entire town that tried to tear them apart ended up begging to stand beside them. John Parker never expected life to shrink the way it did after his wife Melanie died. The ranch-style house felt too big, the nights too quiet, and the silence unbearable. His days were spent tightening loose porch boards, fixing things that weren't really broken, pretending purpose lived somewhere between a toolbox and an empty bed. The diner had become his routine: coffee, 2 sugars, always the same booth he once shared with Melanie. He kept his eyes on the window until a headline in a wrinkled newspaper punched the breath from his lungs. Local tragedy claims young parents, 2 children left behind. He read it once, twice, 3 times. Caleb, 10 years old. Mason, 7. No relatives willing to claim them. A sentence in the article sat like a weight on his chest. Boys currently placed in state foster care. He heard Melanie's voice in his head so clearly, it felt like she was standing beside him. If we can't have our own, then maybe we're meant to help someone who needs us. 2 weeks later, he was in a lawyer's office signing adoption papers while the man raised a brow like John had lost his mind. "You know folks around here are gonna talk," the lawyer warned. John didn't even look up from the paperwork. Let them. Because for the first time in years, fear didn't paralyze him. It pushed him forward. The first time John saw Caleb and Mason in the children's home, he almost forgot to breathe. Caleb walked in with the posture of someone twice his age, shoulders tight, jaw locked, those dark eyes scanning every corner to make sure nothing could hurt his brother. And Mason? Small, trembling, wide-eyed, clutching Caleb's shirt like the world might swallow him whole. "Are you really going to take both of us?" Caleb asked. "That's the only way this works," John said, kneeling. "You come as a package deal." Mason's voice cracked like thin glass. "For how long?" "For good." The words settled in the room like a miracle too fragile to believe, but when Mason stepped forward and put his tiny hand in John's, that was the moment everything changed. The first weeks were storm of emotions. Mason cried himself awake at night, haunted by nightmares of screeching tires and broken glass. Caleb kept everything locked behind a wall of silence, always watching, always protecting, never allowing himself to just be a kid. But the boys weren't the problem. The town was. Whispers followed them everywhere. At the grocery store, people stared at the kids' cereals in John's cart like he was stealing childhood instead of giving it back. At church, their presence was a shockwave, adults turning to whisper like he'd walked in with a scandal, not 2 children. People didn't say the words out loud, but John heard them anyway. A single man adopting 2 boys? It's not natural, not right. He'll regret it. He heard that last one from an old couple walking by his house one afternoon, and when Caleb froze mid-dribble on the driveway, John wanted to march across the street and demand they say it again to his face. Instead, he stepped beside Caleb quietly and put a hand on his shoulder. "You belong here," he said. "Don't let anyone teach you otherwise." Caleb nodded, but his eyes told the truth. He didn't believe it. Nights were hardest. Mason jolted awake screaming from nightmares, those small hands shaking John awake as tears soaked his shirt. John held him for hours, whispering, "You're not alone anymore," until the trembling stopped. Caleb never cried, ever. But one evening he placed a small wooden box in John's hands. Inside were photographs of his parents. "I don't want Mason to see these yet," Caleb whispered. "He's not ready." You learn a lot about someone by the way they protect others, and Caleb, That boy carried an entire world on his shoulders. Slowly, things shifted. Mason's laughter became real instead of nervous. Caleb started watching John's carpentry with a hunger to learn. Small victories, quiet moments of healing. But Springfield still watched them like outsiders. So John made a decision. Render judgment powerless by giving the town no choice but to see the boys as he saw them. He signed Caleb up for basketball and Mason for soccer. He brought them to the spring cleanup day, put paintbrushes in their hands and told them, "Just be yourselves, that's enough." At Caleb's first game, the parents whispered again, but once the boys stepped onto the court, the whispers died. Fast, sharp, focused, he moved like the court belonged to him. By halftime, even the skeptics leaned forward. Afterwards, a man approached John and stuck out a hand grudgingly. "He's got talent." John shook it. "He's got heart." At the spring cleanup day, something unexpected happened. As Mason painted the gazebo railing crookedly, his chatter filling the air, a few older women actually smiled. And when Caleb fixed a wobbly bench with precise hands, an old man clapped him on the back with a quiet, "Good work, son." But the moment everything changed forever, the storm. The sky bruised purple, the wind screamed like something alive, and the power snapped out. John grabbed the boys and rushed to the basement as the house shook like it wanted to tear free. After the chaos faded, the street looked like a war zone. Trees uprooted, roofs ripped open, debris everywhere. John didn't hesitate. "Let's go," he told the boys. "People need us." For days they hauled branches, patched roofs, cleared debris, delivered water, hammered plywood, and held trembling neighbors' hands. And people noticed. Mason's smile was a beam of hope in the wreckage. Caleb worked harder than grown men twice his size. Even the gruffest neighbors muttered thanks. At a community potluck afterward, the mayor stood and pointed right at John and the boys. "This is what community looks like." For the first time, Springfield clapped for them. Not out of politeness, out of respect. The whispers were gone. Years passed, and those boys grew into men who shaped Springfield more than anyone expected. Caleb became an architecture student designing community murals. Mason became a youth leader, inspiring kids, exactly like he used to be. And on the night the community center unveiled a plaque dedicated to the Parker family, honoring their resilience and service to the town that once shunned them, John stood in the back, tears in his eyes, because the revenge he never planned had happened anyway. They didn't just change the town, they rebuilt it. And the same people who whispered behind their backs, now they whispered something new. We're proud of them. When the storm hit, Springfield expected John and the boys to crumble, to prove the gossip right, to fail, to show they didn't belong. Instead, they led the entire town through its darkest moment. And suddenly the critics had nothing left to whisper. Their cruelty forged the very family they tried to tear apart. That's revenge. Not loud, not angry, not violent, but undeniable. Funny thing about judgment, it always falls apart when the truth shows up. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying someone, but becoming someone they can't help but respect. If this story hit you right in the chest, smash that like button and subscribe. And tell me in the comments, have you ever proven someone wrong just by living your life? I want to hear your story.